In ASL, some nouns and verbs are related, and knowing this will help you remember signs and be able to create them a little easier. In English, there are also related nouns and verbs, so I want to give you a few examples of both. We'll start with the English examples. So I find this fascinating. In English, there are nouns and verbs that are, so the words are spelled the same, whether they're a noun or a verb, but they're pronounced differently. There's a verbal emphasis on a different syllable, which indicates whether or not it's a noun or a verb. So here are some examples. So convict is spelled just the same as convict. So convict being the verb and convict being the noun. To protest is a verb, but a protest is a noun, and they're spelled exactly the same. To present something is a verb, or you can receive a present, a noun. Rebel is a verb, or a rebel is a noun. Increase is a verb, or the increase is the noun. Increase. So those are some examples of nouns and verbs in English that are spelled exactly the same, but they're just pronounced differently depending on whether they're a noun or a verb. In ASL, there are related nouns and verbs too. We will learn quite a few of them in the course of time. Related nouns and verbs will have the same parameters: hand shape, palm orientation, location, but they will differ in movement, just like those English ones that I just, examples that I just gave you. They differ on where you put the emphasis, right, in the pronunciation. In ASL, the difference is movement. In ASL, nouns have a repeated movement and verbs do not. It seems a little backwards because a verb is a motion, right? So you'd think that the verb would be the repeated movement, but it's not, it's the other way. Everything else in ASL makes sense, but this doesn't. So in ASL, nouns have repeated movement and verbs do not. There may be some exceptions to this, but this is the general rule. So let me give you some examples. So sit is a verb. There's no repeated movement. Chair is a noun and there's repeated movement. Call, meaning like not call on the phone. It's like this is called a pen kind of thing. So call is no repeated movement. Name, the noun, is the repeated movement. Did I say that right? Call is the verb. I think I messed up the English on that. Call is the verb and there's no repeated movement. Name is the noun and there's repeated movement. Sell, the verb, has no repeated movement, just comes out once. Store is the noun version of sell and that has repeated movement. Print has no repeated movement, it's just once. I'm going to print my paper. Newspaper, or the noun version of printing, is repeated movement. So those are just some examples, not signs you will probably use a lot other than sit and chair and call and name. Sell and store you might use, print and newspaper you might use, but probably a little bit down the road. But this is just sort of a general thing to know, a general thing to look for so that you can make the connections between the verbs and the nouns as you learn them in ASL. One last important point is that you may not always see this signed correctly out in the ASL signing world. Think of it this way. Have you ever heard a native English speaker pronounce something wrong or use a word incorrectly in a sentence? Yes, I'm sure you have. So just like hearing people don't always know or use the rules of English, deaf people don't always know or use the rules of ASL. So you may see someone sign food and see, I get it mixed up. Food and eat exactly the same way instead of with the movement difference. And that's okay. So just like with spoken English, if you understand what's meant, go with it. It's a not always signed correctly, just like we don't always speak correctly. But there you have this fascinating look at related nouns and verbs in both English and ASL.